there's crucial points in the proceedings, and a big one is when your Cafcass officer comes to your house.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to kind of delve into some of those areas as we go through. So, so the first thing that I wanted to ask, particularly with relation to obviously the people that are on this call, the majority of the parents that I work with, and the majority of people that are on this call, is they're working with an ex who they identify as being abusive. They think that they are a risk to the child on some level, and many display alienating behaviours. So if you can explain to us, how do Cafcass evaluate those things so that so that parents can understand what are Cafcass looking for in those sorts of cases?
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the beginning when Cafcass was formed, the private law was addressed by the old welfare officers who came from probation, and their kind of remit really was about trying to get agreement for contact arrangements. So, as they said, we don't do safeguarding. So it was a bit of a rude awakening for a lot of practitioners in the early 2000s, when this concept of safeguarding came in, and we did, Cafcass did police checks and local authority checks. So where Cafcass is now, safeguarding is one of the big parts of their, what they call the Together framework, their kind of concept of how they work with families. So their aim is to do comprehensive, fair assessments. And one of the things that makes it kind of, will be on the Cafcass officer's mind, the FCA's mind, is that their work might be curated by a manager or someone in the improvement team, or even by Ofsted. And what they really don't want is to be criticised for a paucity in their risk assessment, their safeguarding, so that they make sure they've done all the checks, but also that they've used the right kind of tools to assess the risk factors. So all the questions that they ask, the main ones will be about harm and understanding harm. So they have tools to help with that. They have some training to help them with that. And they have frameworks, or the CF is a kind of a child arrangements framework, which for private law set out kind of blocks, kind of areas of kind of risk factors that they needed to focus on, and it provided kind of guidance for that. So there'll be one on domestic abuse and domestic abuse parkway. You may have heard about that. That's recently been updated last year. Controversial in some areas. Cafcass has had quite a journey with domestic abuse. A lot of criticism politically from Women's Aid and others about historically how they haven't understood it, how they've made some recommendations perhaps unsafe. So the domestic abuse pathway has been updated. That's very much kind of a reaction to that. And then there's parental conflict, and Cafcass kind of learnt that parental conflict and domestic abuse are two separate things and needs to be assessed in different ways, and the responses need to be very different. It's not safe to conflate those, although a lot of the kind of behaviours that you see could be quite similar. So there's domestic abuse, parental conflict, and then there's kind of other areas of abuse. They look at drug abuse, alcohol abuse, mental health, and the fourth one is what they would call child refusal and child resistance. So when a child doesn't want to see a parent, and they had quite a good little tool for trying to look at the reasons for that, because there's all kinds of reasons why a child doesn't want to see a parent, and one of those might be parental alienation, so that a parent is coaching, influencing, however subtly or not subtly, their children not to see or not to have a positive relationship with the other parent. Cafcass has struggled with that over the years. It's been highly kind of debated whether there's parental alienation syndrome, whether that exists or not, or be looking at behaviours. And I think it's still an area that Cafcass kind of struggling. They were struggling in actually saying, yeah, this is alienating behaviours, and quite rightly, you should leave it to the court to make those kind of judgments. But yeah, so safeguarding, the risk assessment is at the very sort of heart of what they do. And if you look at the Section 7 report, which is the main welfare report that they have to file to court, it is based on the welfare checklist that goes back to the 89 Act. And the welfare checklist does stipulate that one of the questions is what harms the child suffered, what's the likely harm. So they will want to ask questions about harm. They will want to know about the impact as well. So it's not just, have you been harmed? Do you feel that there's any risks? But what's the impact on you? What's the impact on your child? What's the impact going forward? And also to look at a plan, a safety plan, safety management plan. What can you do? It's one thing to measure the risks. Say, for example, there's horrendous arguments and threats during handover of one child from one parent to the next parent. Well, you need a management plan. So maybe it's done in public, maybe third party takes an involvement in that. So that's kind of sort of very clear example. So one of the tips I think that I would say when being interviewed by a Cafcass officer who will have these questions about harm is to kind of feed them the information that you make sure you have that list of examples where there have been harm or you felt at risk. And it's important they should be thinking, but it's also good for you to think about what was the worst time, what was the last time, is there a pattern, what's the impact? And as a manager, one of the things that I used to look at was how certainly how it impacted on the individuals. What are the chances that there's going to be any change? What would you do to change? But one of the terms that they like to use was behavioural detail. So they can't just say mother has a mental health problem or dad has a drink problem. They have to give more detail about that. About what exactly is the mental health problem? What's been prescribed? What is the drink problem? When the parents were together, did they drink together and that seemed okay? But now that they're separated and in conflict in court, suddenly has that become a big kind of issue, and dad suddenly has a drink problem. So you can help them with the behavioural detail and give them examples, show them examples, and you can almost play bingo, really. You can kind of tick them off as they appear in the report. So, oh yes, now I gave them this lovely example, I gave them this quote, and it appears in the report. So you're kind of helping them out, really, but also kind of making sure that that the things that you feel are important are actually included.